understanding and the review of these writings. So we are having this series for that purpose, and also where we are expecting to have great and our very interesting lectures about mostly philosophies, but about the Western, our on Western writings. So our aim is very clear. And with the first series, we have Professor Bill Mack, the Needham Research Institute, Cambridge, who is going to review the date and character of the Sphujidvajas, Yavanajataka. So he must be reviewing the time frame of when it can be dated, I suppose. So it comes under the purview of our area, because we need to criticize the Indology. Not to criticize Dr. Bill Mack himself, but it is the concepts are very important, and it is our lifelong interest, and it is our duty. Athachet tomimam dharmam sangramam nakarishyase tata swadharmam kirtincha hitva papam avapsase. Our forefathers have not done it. They have not criticized Indology very well. It is mistake. They have missed the train. But at least we should do our own bit of dharma yuddha, because it is our duty to defend what we believe, and we have right and might to do it. It is my intention very clearly, and also I hope Professor Iyengar and Professor MDS they accept it, as well as Dr. Shankar and all others, not to forget. It is the new age and new thinking. And we have one more seminar on March 24, where we are going to invite many young scholars who will review Indological writings on mostly philosophy, whereas the lectures will be by the renowned scholars, seasoned scholars. And not to end with this thing only, we are going to have much more things on the Indological reviews. Okay, we will, all of you will be there. I welcome all of you again. And Sarvebhyaha Swagatam. Dr. Rajat is there, and Ravi Teja, and all other, Ram Prasad is there, Muniswami is there, Prasad Sarai is there, and all other friends are there. So I welcome Dr. Pejattaya to introduce Professor Bill Mack to the audience and start the lecture. We are a little bit late, but we will make the time. We have time till 8 o'clock, till the dinner. So I hope you will be prepared to have a scintillating discussion. Okay? Krishna Arpanamastu.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Krishnam Vande Manthapashadharam Divyarbhakakritim Shikhabandhatrayopetam Bhaishmi Madhvakararchitam. It's my privilege to introduce such a interesting and serious scholarship which is present in the form of Professor Bill Mack. He brings very interesting scholarship which very rare to find. So he a couple of things that I personally found interesting is Indian astral science in the Chinese records that he thoroughly studied, and he is an authentic scholar to speak on that. There are many more things, particularly the foreign astral sciences that are preserved in the Chinese literature. On these aspects, he has very thorough study and scholarship. At the same time, he has studied very rigorously the Yavanajataka text also. So, which is very interesting aspect that he procured that manuscript from Nepal through his Professor Yano, and he studied very critically, and he will be explaining all these things later. Just to set the context, I just wanted to mention this. So the date of Yavanajataka and whatever the discussions on intercultural relationships between different civilizations. So all those things, because of the new date that Professor Bill Mack is arrived at, particularly with regard to this text. So a lot of revisiting is, I mean, it opens the door for revisiting all those discussions around that. So in this regard, his study actually opens newer doors or horizons for such studies. So let me briefly introduce the scholar. So Professor Bill Mack is Professor of History of Science at the University of Science and Technology of China and Research Associate at the Needham Research Institute, Cambridge. His research spans the history of science in Asia, Sino-Indian historical relations, and Mahayana Buddhism, with particular attention to the transmission of astral sciences across cultural and linguistic boundaries. He completed his linguistic training at McGill University, earning BA honors in 1996, specializing in Sanskrit and East Asian languages. He subsequently received his PhD in Indian language. In Indian languages and literature from Peking University in 2010. Following his doctorate, he held research and teaching appointments in Hong Kong at the University of Hong Kong, in Germany at Hamburg University, and in Japan at Kyoto University. Professor Mack has authored over 30 peer-reviewed academic articles and is co-editor of Overlapping Cosmologies in Asia, published by Brill. He is currently completing a major monograph titled Foreign Astral Sciences in China, from the 6 dynasties to the Northern Song, to be published by Routledge under the Needham Research Institute monograph series. So with this, this entire event that what we have planned this evening. So first he will be presenting the lecture on Yavanajataka, the data and the characteristics of Yavanajataka. And we will be having a short break. After that, we will be having a very interesting panel discussion. So I'm very pleased to announce that we have the towering scholars in this area, both Professor R.N. Iyengar and Professor Padma Shri M.D. Srinivas. So the panel discussion also, including Professor Bill M. Mack. So the panel discussion also will be very engaging, I'm sure, with regard to that. So we'll be looking forward to your active engagement and participation in this both sessions. So over to you, Bill Mack.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Pejataya, for the very kind introduction. And I thank the organizer here at Poornaprajna Samshodhana for inviting me here. And also, I feel extremely honored to be in the presence of eminent scholars in the field, really predecessor of my teachers, even Professor Iyengar and also Professor Srinivas. So let me just say that I'm not going to criticize anyone today. Just I want to put it out there. I'm interested in the text, what they say, and what we can learn from them. So the focus of today's talk is the Yavanajataka, reassessing the date and character. So there will be 3 parts to today's talk. I will talk about a summary of what the research on this text is about, and a little bit of my personal journey, how I came to study this text. And then the second part, I will look at some of the current research, and finally, what we still can do with this text. So let us take a look of what this text is about. I want to open the discussion with this image, the intercivilization inter-civilization no dialogue. So between Greece, ancient India, and China. Because in the pre-modern period, these three civilizations, they are engaged in very deep cultural dialogue. And science, and especially astronomy, being the foremost science in the pre-modern period, is actually the it consists. A lot of this cultural dialogue consists of astronomical content. Well, the Yavanajataka literally is the horoscopy. So it's the study of this particular form of astroscience of the Yavana. So who exactly the Yavana is, it will be discussed later in this talk. But in terms of horoscopy or Jataka, this body of knowledge is actually very widely spread in the entire Eurasian supercontinent. So, you know, in the West, people still practice horoscopy, and in Southeast Asia, here in India, maybe even a little bit less known is, in fact, in East Asia, in Japan and China, there is also this tradition of horoscopy, and they are all interconnected in some way. But for a long time, scholars in the 20th century haven't paid much attention to this because it's considered, this is what actually Neugebauer described, the wretched subjects, because it's considered to be anti-rational, it's not scientific, superstitious, so we have not been paying much attention. Until these two scholars that we will actually mention, the Neugebauer and David Pingree. The reason why they became prominent scholars in this field of sort of trans-Eurasian astroscience is because their work on the very early materials from Babylonia. So you look at some of these so-called Chaldean or even ancient Greek materials, they are scholars in these ancient languages such as Akkadian and ancient Greece, and then they made a lot of very interesting discoveries and connect these materials with what we have now today. And of course, India is also part of this great cultural exchange. So Pingree played a role in this dialogue. A lot of people actually label me as a criticizer of Pingree. I don't like to say that. But indeed, a lot of the views of David Pingree need to be revisited. What I show you here is a manuscript I recently looked at in Berlin. So there's this collection of Jyotisha manuscripts, and maybe some of you are familiar with this Narada Samhita. So the 18 authors mentioned as the great astronomers, the Jyotishi. And among them is mentioned Yavana and also Garga. And of course, Professor Iyengar here is very much known as the authority on the works of Garga, and I have also very deep interest in this text. It's interesting to see the juxtaposition. So all these great astronomers in the Vedic astroscience, in the world of Vedic astroscience, but already very early on, since the 19th century, there are scholars who would distinguish, actually there are two layers. For example, the Yavana, they describe the Rashi, the Vara, and so on. And then the earlier Vedic astroscience, they don't have that. And instead, they play more emphasis on the nakshatra and the tithi and so on. So that sort of inspired the Western scholars to look deeper into these different layers of materials within the Indian Jyotisha corpus. I think 2 days ago, I gave the lecture in Chanakya University, and it's mentioned this verse from Brihat Samhita. So, Mlecha hi yavanateshu samyak shastram vidam stitam rishavate pipujyante kim punardaiva vidra. So, the Yavana here can be understood very broadly as the Greek. So even though they are foreigners, they were being honored as if they were rishis. So how much more the the Brahmins, the Dvija. So there's this awareness of a body of foreign knowledge within the Indian tradition. But what exactly is this Yavana Siddhanta? For a long time, it's not very clear. Until David Pingree made a new edition of this text, and that changed the whole narrative, as we know, how the Indian astroscience evolved. So what is the narrative provided by David Pingree? Well, he demonstrated that a lot of these so-called Yavana materials ultimately, as the name suggests, from the Yavana world, so from the Hellenistic world. And of course, the Greeks were not the original creator of this body of knowledge. They were also indebted to the Babylonians. So, and this body of materials is not purely Babylonian. There's some Egyptian, there's some indigenous Greek inventions combined into this Hellenistic astroscience, and from here is transmitted to India. And of course, in India already there was an older Vedic tradition. So there was sort of confluence of the older Vedic tradition with the Hellenistic astroscience. And therefore, you have a work such as the Yavanajataka. Now, this is a little bit controversial that Pingree created as a result of his study of this Yavana text. Basically, he characterized Indian astronomy into 5 stages. Namely, the first stage, Vedic, up to the time of the Vedanga Jyotisha, that which he labeled or determined to be roughly around 400 BCE. And then after that, Babylonian stage, and after that, Greco-Babylonian, and after that, Greek, and then finally Islamic. And then he characterized the Vedic period as crude and rudimentary mathematical structure. So a lot of Indian scholars are not very happy with this scheme, I think rightly so, because what David Pingree suggests is that there's nothing original in Indian astronomy. So everything that is innovative comes from outside. So this is a narrative created by David Pingree in his very much authoritative work on the subject titled Jyotish Shastra in 1981. So today, if you look at any textbook on this subject, this is very much a standard still adhered to. And I think it's time to revisit this scheme. And I think indeed, actually, a lot of people have come up with alternative schemes. But the basis of this scheme was largely based on the Yavanajataka. So now let us look at this text. What is the Yavanajataka? Well, this text was known to Indian scholars for a long time. But the edition of this text did not come out in the 20th century until David Pingree found this manuscript from Nepal, and then he edited it. So even back in the 1865, Hendrik Kern, the Dutch scholar, he remarked this name, Spujitwaja, which is a very curious name. So he pointed out that this name itself is actual Indo-Greek. So half of it is Greek, and half of it is Sanskrit. So Spujit, actually, it comes from Aspujit, and it is originally Greek, Aphrodite, meaning Venus. And then Dwaja is Sanskrit, you know. So literally is Venus flag. So that is a very interesting observation. And in 1897, Mitra and Shastri, when they did the survey of manuscripts, they recorded the manuscript of the Yavanajataka in the Nepalese collection. And then in 1905 and 1911, Shastri and Kane, they start deciphering the text. But because it's a very long text, over 1,000, 2,000 verses, they never actually came to the complete transcription or translation of the text. And David Pingree, who was a student at that time, took up the opportunity. And that became his PhD thesis in Harvard. Originally, he was working on the Vritta Yavanajataka, and it turns out Yavanajataka is so much more interesting. He just gave up Vritta Yavanajataka and did his PhD on this text. And based on his PhD thesis, he produced this complete edition and English translation in 1978, which is considered the authoritative source on this work. So what is the significance of this work? Well, beside the way David Pingree used it to construct his chronology of Indian astronomy, he also described this text as an astrological / astronomical work composed in 269 or 270 because it's Shaka era, so there's 1 year error margin. By Spujitwaja, an Indianized Greek who lived in the realm of Western Chatrapas. And the work was a versification of a prose original in Greek composed by Yavaneshvara in Alexandria in 149-150 CE. The work, though highly corrupt and clumsily expressed, contains algorithm of ultimately Babylonian origin and the earliest reference to a decimal place value with a symbol of 0. Bracket Bindu. Well, there's a lot of information there, and a lot actually very significant in the history of science, not only for India, but for the entire human race. Namely, there's this reference to 0 in a text that can be dated. So this is very exciting news for all the scholars around the world. And also, it's extremely early. When you think about manuscript with dates in India, actually, they are very rare in the early first millennium. So it already is quite remarkable that he found this text with a date that could be dated as early as the 2nd century CE. So that is a very important discovery, and that sort of catapult Pingree's career for the rest of his life. Even today, how many of you have read this book by William Dalrymple, The Golden Road? Can you show of hand? Maybe not that popular among the audience here, but he is a very popular writer here in India, I understand. And he has a very sympathetic also approach toward the Indian culture. And in this work, he cited also the Yavanajataka, making a number of claims, which I now consider to be incorrect. So we have to be very careful. As much as a popular writer he is, after all, not a historian. So he is a writer. So we have to be very careful when we read popular history. So we'll go through in our lecture what are these claims and what the problems are and what is our current understanding of this text. Well, first of all, let me just put it out there that there's no dispute that this text has Greek influence, just like the name of it. It has some elements from the Yavana. Like you have terms that like apoklima, that is from the Greek, meaning the cadent place. Diametra from diametron, meaning actually original horizon. It can also mean diametrically opposed. And then Decana from Deccanos, Decans, and which is ancient Hellenistic, also mixed with Egyptian concept. Lipta, which is from lepton Greek, which is a unit, and this is a unit quite clearly not used in the Vedic period, but only in the later period. So these things are all from the Hellenistic world. So there's no doubt about that. The last one is curious, hora. So although hora is used in all the Indian languages, including Sanskrit, referring to a number of concepts, but including horoscopy, but also other concepts in Jyotisha. But originally, it should be Greek as well. But Varamihira actually understood as an abbreviation Ahoratra. So this is curious. So this could be studied later in Brihat Samhita. He has a verse saying that Ahoratra, you cut off the A and then the tra, it becomes Hora. But leaving that aside, and this terminology, some of them are actually survived in the later, broader Jyotisha literature. If you read the Brihajataka of Varamihira, you see a parallel set of terms for the planets, for example. So the sun usually is Aditya, but you can also call it Heli. Why? because Heli is actually Greek from Helios, and so on. So you have this parallel sets of Greek words found in Brihajataka. And also the names of the Rashi, you have also these indigenous Sanskrit terms, and then another set of terms that come ultimately from Greek. Now, is it really a translation of a Greek text? That is the question that I want to ask. And as it turns out, it's not that simple. But in the text itself, it talks about something that is attested neither in India nor in Greece. One of these things is the cycle of 165 years. So of course, the concept of yuga is quite uniquely Indian. But in other cultures, you have also astronomical cycle. But this particular cycle of 165 years is not found anywhere else. So only in this text. So this is a bit of a mystery that has not been solved. But the more important thing is that in this text, Yavanajataka, we find a lot of Indian elements, namely divination using the Sanskrit letters, so all the aksharas are described. You have description of Ayurveda, you have description of the Shaiva sect, and then you have all kind of Indian astrological kind of hybridization. So how do you explain these Indian elements in a supposedly Greek text? So that is not so easily explained. Now, Pingree made a number of claims that have been disputed by scholars even before I started my work. So first of all, are there really two dates of the text? Remember that passage I gave you? Are there two authors? One is Yavaneshvara and another one is Pujitvaja. So that's one question. And then another question, is it really a work by foreigner? So is Yavaneshvara or Pujitvaja a non-Indian? So that's the question. And the third area that has been disputed is Pingree's what we call an interventionist approach. So he described the text as being very clumsily composed, and that was the justification for his emendation. So now that's the question, is it really that clumsily composed? So it turns out later, we will see, Shukla, the great Indian scholar, pointed out that no, it's actually not that clumsily composed. So you don't actually need to amend it, you just need to understand it properly. So this is a point that we need to pay attention to. And the last point about the zero and the Buddha Sankhya, do they really exist in this text? It seems to be very early to have the Buddha Sankhya. And it turns out that those elements that claim to be Buddha Sankhya and zero, they did not actually exist in the text. It was Pingree's own emendation. So let us look at some of the concrete cases, what I was talking about. So Pingree described the text as highly corrupt and clumsily expressed. So this is his 1978, is in a dictionary, encyclopedia entry, and a lot of students on Indian astronomy would use this as a reference to study the basic concept of Indian astronomy. It's actually very useful. So I would recommend you to look at it. Because it is a very good summary, but it's not completely without mistakes. One of the mistakes concerns his characterization of Pujitvaja's work. For example, he describes Pujitvaja's value for the solar year as not very precise. And then why? Why did Pingree claim that the solar year data were not precise? Because in the text, he claimed that there are various figures. So in one place is this value, and in another place is this value or this value. So there are three different values of the solar year. That's why he claimed that the text is not very precise. As it turns out, it's not because of the text, it's his reading not very precise. So this is what we discover as a result of our analysis of the text. So Shukla, whom I mentioned earlier, produced a critical review of Pingree's work. So let me read to you. He described the text and some of the things we mentioned earlier, namely the period, the yuga of 165 years, and the synodic motion of the planets. And then he said, the text is marred by faulty editing. The correct readings being adopted and correct ones given in the apparatus criticus, with the result that the translation is incorrect at places and the meaning really intended by the author is lost. Unfortunately, Pingree never responded to Shukla's critique. But also, Shukla did not look at the manuscript. He just looked at Pingree's edition and translation, and on the basis of these two things, he made this observation. And it turned out that Shukla was correct. And below, actually, there is this lost folio that was later discovered by other scholars that Pingree did not use. So it's not so relevant at this point. Now, if we look at Pingree's source, so how did he get this information? How did he get the dates of Yavanajataka? So I think, well, he actually produced this critical edition of the Yavanajataka in Devanagari. And this is actually his handwriting. I must say that it's very neat looking. So unlike a lot of modern Western or Western trained scholar, we tend to transcribe everything in Romanization. He actually transcribed in Devanagari. And then this is his transcription of the last 3 verses, which gave the basis of his dating. Do I need to read the Sanskrit? But I think you can see it. But let me just point out the most important part. So starting from the beginning, sorry, I have to change my glasses. Okay, so iti swabhashara chanan abhiguptam Vishnu graha, and then there's a sign because the manuscript is not clear, and then che, and then mahi pamukyai anudrishta tatvam horar taratna karavak sumutram. And then it goes on. So the important part in the red is the Vishnu Graha. So that is where he interpreted the number 71. So that's how he got the date of the Shaka era. Of course, it's quite problematic when you think about it. Well, first of all, is Vishnu 1? Well, I think you can argue, although it's very unconventional as a Buddha Sankhya. The more problematic number is Graha. Is Graha 7 or is it 9? Well, he argued that usually we think of Graha is 9 because of Navagraha, but he argues that in this period you don't have Rahu and Ketu, so he changed the interpretation to 7. So this number, Vishnu Graha, becomes 71. But for me, the biggest problem is that I don't think this is a Buddha Sankhya at all, because there is something after it, and he did not read it. So there's this blank and then chair. So what are those? Now, not only this, there's another expression, Narayanang ketu mitabda drishtam. And this he translates as 191 Shaka era. So this, to me, is also problematic, although he argues that, okay, Narayana is 1, and then Anka is 9, and then Indu is 1. So 191 Shaka. So you get another number. So this looks plausible, but as it turns out, this is all Pingree's emendation. Now, I had the chance to go to Nepal and actually look at the manuscript. And this is my story of sort of unraveling the history of the text. Because when I first look at the text, and I work with Yano Michio, and I thought it's just an exercise to learn the Nevadi script and just to look at the manuscript. We did not expect that Pingree, we would revise Pingree's reading. And then in 2011, then another discovery was made. There was another manuscript of the Yavanajataka that was mislabeled as something else. And then we found this text. And finally, we can compare the manuscripts. And we find Pingree's readings in many places are actually incorrect. Now, if you look at this, this is the, maybe it's not so clear. This is exactly the part that would read Vishnu Graha. And then right here, Vishnu Graha, and then something after that, right? So there's more, and then the chair, and then something, something. So unless we figure out what that something, something is, we cannot really say this is a Buddha Sankhya of a date. And moreover, Shaka is not actually described in the text. So even more problematic is another place that we look at, the Indu and then Anka and Narayana, this part. So in the clear manuscript, clearly it doesn't say Anka. It's actually Arka. so if Arka, then it cannot be Anka and it cannot be 9. So how many sons are there? How do you interpret? Would it be 12? So usually Arka or 1. So anyway, it cannot be 9. And more problematic of the text is that all these numbers occur at the end of the manuscript that has been broken off. So this is the problem of preservation, and also very precious palm leaf manuscript. Every time we handle it, if you are not careful, then a little piece would drop off. And this is precisely the location of the dates. So now I revised based on my own reading of the new manuscript. I come up with the new translation. And in the past, Yavaneshwara, whose vision of truth came from the grace of the sun, whose sentences are blameless from jewel mind of horoscopy, which is an ocean of words, whose meaning was very obscure by reason of being written in his own language, descended from Vishnu, the planets, nakshatra, and the moon. So this is actually the lineage that he was describing, where this knowledge of Jyotisha comes from. Taught this treatise of horoscopy in excellent words for the benefit of the world. There was a wise king named Spujitvaja who composed this entire text, which was beheld by Vishnu, sun, moon, Maya, and so on, in 4,000 Indravajra verses. So this is my revision of the last 3 verses of the text. Now, another part of the text that I mentioned that is problematic is this part that describes the 0. So according to Pingree, the oldest 0 is found in the Yavanajataka, and there's a bindu there. If you look at the apparatus, actually he said himself there's no bindu. It's actually vidya. So he thought vidya would be a corruption of bindu. Then he changed the text to bindu. Because after all, he thought that the author or the scribe was extremely clumsy. So these are kind of the emendations sometimes as editors we would make. But as it turns out, actually, vidya is okay. I mean, you don't need to make a drastic emendation. Shukla actually make the emendation to vidi. It's like the vidi with the root vid to means no, so imperative, know that. So there's actually no bindu in this text. And this is the vidi there. So in this text, you find a very interesting mixture of both Vedic and Greek units. So this section, I'm not going to spend too much time. So this is not so controversial. There's nothing really problematic here. There's a somewhat problematic in a part that I will show you here. Oh, okay, so this is the part that you find the vidi. So what the text says is actually, okay, Kramena Chandra Chayavritti Lakshas Titish Chaturman Navidham Najivam Shat Panchakagra Dvishati Sahasram Tesham Yuge Vid Dyayutan Dishatcha. So actually it gives you the number of titis in a yuga. So the vidi is to know that there are 60,000 plus 1,000 plus 200 plus 6 times 5. And that is 61,230 in a yuga. And that is a yuga of 165 years. So this is not my discovery, but Shukla made this discovery saying that actually the text was perfectly consistent. So it was describing the correct number of titis in the number of yugas. So Pingree, on the other hand, because he wanted to read the bindu in the text, he got a wrong number of 60,265, and he would argue that the author got it incorrect or the text being imprecise, but there's nothing like that. The author was perfectly correct. And then there are some not very good mathematics in Pingree's edition. So maybe it's just careless. So in Pingree's translation in this verse, let me read for you. So it's dinam chatushash tilavon namahus titim dushatta kyamahas tasarvam trishash tibage nayutam sahastram yuge vamanam apashap tashatkam. It's a little bit tricky. You need to take apart the numbers to figure out what they want to say. So basically it says, they say that a day, dinam, minus 1/64 of a day is a titi. So a titi is a little bit less than a day. On the other hand, a day, that is called also due, is 1 whole titi plus 1/63. The number of omitted titis and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that part doesn't really concern us. So this relationship between day and the titi is a very important one. And actually in the Vedanga Jyotisha is also described. So if you work out the math, actually the ratio is 64:63. So a titi is a day minus 1/64 of a day. And a day is a titi plus 63rd of a titi. So that's the mathematical relationship. So a primary school student can now work out for you. But for some reason, Pingree got a 60th instead of 63rd. So actually, mathematically, this is incorrect. Well, so from the Yavanajataka, what we see is that indeed there's this network of knowledge that moved around Eurasia, from the Hellenistic world, from Persia all the way to Greece. It moved through India and ultimately from India to Central Asia to China, and from China to Korea and Japan. So we can reconstruct this sort of spread of knowledge. But Yavanajataka's role is only a part of this story, and it's not the complete story. So I can tell you that in Japan, for example, since the 8th century, we have this kind of radio horoscope that is very much in the same genre of the kind of horoscopy described in the Yavanajataka. And even today, if you go to Japan and you see this depiction of the 12 Rashi, you see them, but of course they are written in Chinese. Some of them are a little bit unusual. And in my book, I talk about the Central Asian influences. But largely, they have this Indian substratum. And of course, in South Asia, they largely preserve the Indian astroscience, including both the 27 nakshatras and the 12 rashis. So this is in Thai, in a system that is called the Brahma Jati. And in Thai language, it's called Horasat. Horasat is actually Hora Shastra. So that is the pronunciation in the Thai language. And in Indonesia, of course, they preserve also this knowledge. And you have this Javanese zodiac cup from the 14th century. They're largely indebted to the Indian culture. So my revision of the dating of the text now is to the second half of the 6th century, which is a little bit disappointing to a lot of scholars, because scholars in general are interested in early dating of material so that they can connect their own interests and works to this work. That it is what it is. So now what is the current research that is ongoing? When I first made this discovery in 2013, I think a lot of people expressed some skepticism. My work was reviewed by a number of scholars, including S.R. Sharma, and also Dominic Vujastic and Jano Michio and so on. So they thought it's really worth putting it out and then let everyone debate about it. So far, no one made a counter claim to sort of defend Pingree's view. A lot of people feel that it's unfair for Pingree because he passed away already. So why are you criticizing someone who died? I said, no, I'm not criticizing Pingree. I'm pointing out that there's actually a new understanding of the text. And since then, Filiosa, Brown, and including here among us, Professor Srinivas, have written about the implication of this new dating. So to summarize, what is our current understanding of this text? Well, first of all, no dates were actually given in this text, which is typical of early Jyotisha text. But the fact that it was quoted by Bhaskara suggests that it must predate Bhaskara in 629. He was not quoted by Varamihira, so it likely would date after Varamihira. But Bhattottala, in his commentary on the Brihasamhita and Brihajataka, cited extensively the Yavanajataka. Another observation is that there were no two dates. There were no two authors. So when the text described the author being Yavaneshvara and Spujitvaja, Yavaneshvara is actually Spujitvaja. So this is not surprising because in other similar texts, in the Vritta Yavanajataka, Meena Raja, which is the author of Vritta Yavanajataka, is also described as Yavanadi Raja. So it's typical, it's acceptable to have this kind of epithet. Also, as Shukla pointed out, the text was not clumsily expressed as Pingree thought. It was largely internally consistent. So again, we have to give the credit to the author of the text itself. The text consists, or it contains no Buddha Sankhya, so rather disappointingly, and there is no reference to zero either. So although zero could be an early invention or very early application in India, it's not found in this text. So that's what we find. So for those who want to look at the discussion, you are welcome to look at my summary in 2024, which you can download freely on the internet. Now, what is the future for our research on this text? Well, here I'm cited Professor Srinivas. He mentioned that what we need to do is to produce a complete edition of this text. And indeed, this is in the making. Perhaps maybe if the scholars are here interested, we can work together and produce a Devanagari edition of this text. At the moment, there are also some critique of, for example, scholars like David Pingree claiming that is over-interpretation, and there was a sort of Orientalist critique claiming that Pingree actually reconstructed a fabrication. If I could ever defend Pingree, even once, I must say that maybe that was not his intention. He was not intended to deceive the readers. But I think he was so confident of his overall narrative, of that everything came from Greece. So he has a Hellenocentric perspective, that he started to see things he wants to see. And these are some of the emendations that he made in the text. On the other hand, there were also some critiques by Western Indologists that maybe another extreme is happening also in the current narrative. Namely, there's ancient Indian scientific culture, there's 4,000 years old battery and the flying Vimana and all that. So maybe there was another extreme as well. So at the moment, this is how the Yavanajataka discussion is being placed. Well, I personally, I think that I like to look at the evidence. I like to look at the text. So the next step of our research will be to produce a complete critical edition of the text based on the new manuscripts. So it's a laborious project. I find it really commendable. For example, I came to meet Professor Iyengar's team today, who dedicated their time editing the Vritta Gargiya Jyotisha, and it's a very meticulous work. There's so many variants, so many possible emendations. So this is a slow going work, but it's very necessary for other scholars to use and to discuss. So with that, I finish my talk, and these are some of the references for those of you who are interested in the topic. Thank you very much.
Can you expand a little bit on your dating, which you were saying in the end? I mean, what other reasons you are giving?
Yes, I think my dating, well, as I said, the dates are not given in the text, so they can only be conjectured based on circumstantial evidence. So one of them is testimonia, because of Bhaskara's citation of 629, and then the fact that Varamihira did not mention it. So that plays in that particular period of 6th century. There are other evidence. I listed them in my article. You can look at it and see if you agree with them. For example, the Kapalika, Shaiva sect, with the skulls. So there are a lot of works who done on this particular sect. They cannot be as early as the 2nd century. So the 6th century and the 5th century, 6th century seems to be the right period for this particular sect in the Shaiva tradition. So there are little clues you can glean from the 2000 something verses. So once, I think this is one of the interesting projects. For example, there's a book that look at Varamihira's work and to try to create a worldview based on Varamihira's work. Another thing that we can do with the Yavanajataka is to reconstruct the worldview based on the horoscopy described in the Yavanajataka. Because in the horoscopy, they usually give you what is very good and then give you the very bad. So these kind of people, that kind of society and so on. So we can actually put together a better picture of what exactly is the societal features that the author was creating.
Why should we be talking about the Kushana era, etc.? He's somewhere in 6th century. What would be his interest in talking about that?
Yes. I think the text is cumulative. So there must be other Yavana texts in the Upajati meter that were incorporated into the text. So there are things that are not entirely congruous in the last chapter. So I think that's a very valid observation. He also mentioned Vashishta's system. So why did he mention that suddenly? It looks like they are taken from somewhere a little bit out of context.
You said Vashishta, 6th century, meaning you mean Varamihira's Vashishta.
That would be a Vashishta that is before the 6th century. But of course, which so Pingree previously, there is a later Vashishta, right? So previously, Pingree would claim that there are two Vashishta. One described in Yavanajataka in the 3rd century, another one in the 5th, 6th century. But now we don't have that problem anymore. It's because if it is dated 6th century, it can be any time before the 6th century. So that's my understanding of the Vashishta. Yes, we are 4:30 already. Should I take off the? Okay. Oh, okay. Yes. Or maybe we can turn on the light. We don't use this anymore. Then I can change my glasses. That's what happens when you get old. You cannot really read manuscript anymore. So you have to do manuscript works when your eyes are good. Yes.
In your picture, you had pictures of direction of the information transfer from one culture to another. It seemed to flow from west to east. Is there any evidence or reason to pursue information transmitting the other way?
Oh, this is a very common question. I have to make the clarification every time. Now, the direction of knowledge flows all directions. I'm just pointing out this particular body of knowledge as evidence in this text shows this flow of direction. So of course there are other texts that goes the other direction. Yeah, this is the same question when I show also in China, because I tell everyone, oh, so all the knowledge came from India to China, and then like a million hands coming up. No, we have also our own knowledge. Well, that's what not I'm saying. I'm saying this particular body of foreign science came from here, and then these are the evidence. Okay, thank you. Should I sit here or?
Yeah, thank you for that enriching presentation and that meticulous study also. Let us have a break for 10 minutes, and after that we shall continue the or begin the panel discussion. Yeah, thank you. Professor R.N. Nayangarji, another distinguished panelist in this discussion. He is a director of the Center of Ancient History and Culture at Jain University since 2012, where he is actively engaged in research in Indian knowledge systems, particularly the history of science in India. A civil engineer by training, he is renowned for his contributions to earthquake engineering, random vibrations, mathematical modeling, structural dynamics, and nonlinear systems. He served on the faculty of the Indian Institute of Science from 1969 until his retirement in 2005 as KSIDC Chair Professor in Civil Engineering, publishing about 200 technical papers, reports, articles, and books. He is also he is a fellow of the Indian National Academy of Engineering, the Indian Academy of Science, the National Academy of Sciences, and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, Germany. He held the distinguished chair at Florida Atlantic University, USA, served as director of CBRI, CSIR, and was Raja Ramanna Fellow of the Department of Atomic Energy. After establishing the Center for Disaster Mitigation, which a unique fire research laboratory, he continues as a distinguished emeritus professor and director at HC. Particularly his studies on comets, eclipses, earthquakes, ancient geography, precision, dhruva in Vedic literature, and probability in classical music have drawn wide attention. His publications include Parashara Tantra, Narada Shilpam, a critical work on Vruddhagargiya Jyotisha, and the recently published Mahasalilam, which brings to light an early stratum of Indian natural science and its foundational cosmological and observational concepts. So it's indeed a pleasure to introduce such a distinguished scholar to the audience. We offer a warm welcome to you, sir. Professor Bill Mack, I already introduced him, so without further delay, I once again offer a warm welcome to Professor Bill M. Mack. And we have very distinguished scholars and poets also in this gathering. So I offer welcome to you. So with this, I will go to that. No, sir. No, since we are running very late, so I will just...
I will finish before you go. I welcome Professor Ramakrishna Pejattaya, who is a well-known Ashtavadhani and himself scholar of Jyotishya and Sahitya, and great poet by himself on his own right. I welcome Professor Ramakrishna Pejattaya, who is heading the Department of IKS in Chanakya University. I welcome all of you once again. As and when time permits, I will join them. But these are the scholars of Jyotishya. We are all not very much concerned with the thing, and I request you to. And tea is here. You can have.
Sir, you can have the tea. Please. So, yeah, the topic is broadly in the astral sciences in India. We broadly classify in two categories. It is not really established categorization in the technical text, but usually we say that pre-Aryabhata and post-Aryabhata, or many times we use the terms like prior to 5th century or post-5th century. So the reason behind this is post-Aryabhata, we have, we get lot of literary works and that belong, or the representative works for each and every century. For example, in the 5th century we have Aryabhatiyam, for the 6th century we have Varahamihira, and then 7th century Bhaskara I and several other including Brahmagupta. So in this way we find the classical texts that can be, though a lot of texts are lost also. For example, Aryabhata's, amongst the Aryabhata's works, Aryabhatiyam we have with us, but Arya Siddhanta is not available. But still we can get insights and how the tradition of this astral science actually flourished or evolved over the period of time. We can get lot of evidences to construct the history of astronomy and astrology. So when it comes to the pre-Aryabhatta period, because of the absence of many texts, so Aryabhatta, Varamir also mentions that, and in his Pancha Siddhantika, he says that it is a compilation of Prachina Pancha Siddhantas. So we get the mentions of many classical texts, but they are not extant. So due to this, the constructing the history of astral science becomes challenging. So we have taken this particular topic for this discussion. First of all, I request Professor M.D. Srinivasji, the major question that whether do we see drastic change between the pre and post Aryabhatta period, or particularly with regard to the concepts or the frameworks that are present in astral sciences. So do we see such drastic change, or do we see a systematic or organic development? So this is the question to you, sir. And any other thing also as a, what to say, to set the context, you can add.
Namaskara. I am sitting between two experts who have done very detailed work on sources of ancient Indian astronomy and of course on Chinese astronomy here. I am no scholar of Sanskrit or of ancient texts in the usual sense of the term, but I have some idea as a student of ancient Indian astronomical tradition. What is the sort of scholarship that has gone on, and how do we understand it? What are the questions and things like that? So I will also be mostly posing questions to the two scholars who have studied the sources in great detail. You see, when 100 years, 140 years ago, when this great Maharashtrian historian of astronomy, I'm forgetting his name, he wrote this Bhartiya Shankara Balakrishna Dikshit. So he wrote 2 volumes on history of Indian astronomy. One he called pre-Siddhantic, another one he called Siddhantic astronomy. And in the pre-Siddhantic part, he really didn't have much material which was specifically related with astronomy, meaning they were either the Vedic corpus or Mahabharata, and to some extent we had the this Arka Jyotisha and Yajusha Jyotisha of Garga, and perhaps few more texts, whereas it was the post-Siddhantic which had all the texts. So in that sense, there is perhaps a gap in, it was there at least 150 years ago between the pre-Siddhantic and the post-Siddhantic. But now if we take Aryabhatta as the starting point, the problem is it's a very complete text in itself. It's something like Siddhantic astronomy starting with full-fledged, it's like Panini's Ashtadhyayi, that it couldn't have been the first systematization of Vyakarana. In the same sense, Aryabhatiya cannot be the first systematization of Siddhantic astronomy. It's coming as a almost complete sort of, say in 30 verses he has all the mathematics, including Kutaka, and he has the sine function, and he has the second order sort of difference equation for sine function, analogous to its differential equation. I mean, somebody who is defining sine function cannot be doing that much in one round. So that's why people who have studied Aryabhatta either think that he has borrowed the whole thing from Hipparchus or somebody else, or so it's difficult to understand. Similarly, in his Golapada, he has whole of spherical astronomy. Most of the formulae that we teach in spherical astronomy, relation between the different coordinate systems, or the what is the chara, or the other, whatever astronomical quantities are coming, he has all the formulae, most of them correct except for a couple of them which are approximate, in the form in which we are even teaching them today, which is the agra or the chara, or even for the various other quantities which come in eclipse calculation. He has more or less many of the fairly, and they are all new formulae. You cannot find them in Ptolemy. you cannot find them in any other non-Indian work involving the sine function. So it cannot be that somebody who is saying he's 23 in 499 of Common Era has come up with all this in one stroke. So there must have been a, and so the work of Poornaprajna actually proves that only. Poornaprajna has only one sentence about Aryabhata, saying that he used the midnight as the starting point, and the same person in another text is saying the sunrise is the starting point of our calculation from Kali Yuga. This is the only verse he refers to Aryabhata in his Pancha Siddhantika. And he is saying, I am summarizing, as Professor Pejate had said, the earlier Siddhantas. Only they are not exactly reproduction of the earlier Siddhantas. He has done some work on them. What it is, he has not told us. Again, perhaps the version of Pancha Siddhantika that we have, it's not very easy to make out which portion belongs to which Siddhanta. There are questions. So, but that perhaps mostly scholars have sorted out reasonably. So, you see the Vaitamaha Siddhanta there, which is almost very similar to the astronomy that is given in the Arka Jyotisha or Archa Jyotisha, Yajusha Jyotisha of Lagadha. It doesn't have much more than that, with some epoch point of 80 of Common Era. Whereas you have a considerable amount called Vasishta Siddhanta, though the epoch supposedly given is around 499 of the Common Era for that, but you have substantial amount of material under Vasishta Siddhanta, and that's very important and very interesting, and perhaps least understood by us today for various reasons. Then of course you have Romaka and Paulisha, and you have a version of Saura Siddhanta also, and you have everything formulated already in Bhuta Sankhya, everything again formulated again in terms of the sine function in Surya Siddhanta. So it's again a fairly advanced text for summarizing all this. So if all this started in India, if we want to believe Pingree, he said that there is this Vaitamaha Siddhanta of Vishnu Dharmottara Purana. So that version he claimed was the original Brahma Siddhanta, which brought in all this Siddhantic astronomy in India, and he dated it in the first quarter of 5th century of the Common Era. I think Mac also has a paper on the Pingree's edition of Vaitamaha Siddhanta. Anyway, so this cannot be believed. We have to have a continuous tradition from the Vedic corpus to the Aryabhatan corpus of astronomy. So now what are the possibilities? So for a long time only Arka Jyotisha, Yajusha Jyotisha were discussed, and they were called Vedanga Jyotisha. That is a fairly advanced text in terms of what it purports to do. It discusses mean motion of sun and moon in an approximate period of 5-year yuga. And again here they have a very accurate value, fairly accurate value of the sidereal and the synodic periods of the moon, that is Tithi and Nakshatra are determined by that. Though again Pingree confused the matter by saying that 5-year yuga, it said was 1830 days. And Pingree said this should be Nakshatra Dina, this should be sidereal days. Because we all know solar year is around 365 only. So how can we be talking about 366 days? And therefore, if you think of them as sidereal days, then the value of the lunar sidereal period will not be 27.3 something, it will be something else. Similarly, the value of the synodic period of the moon will again be not 29.53 etc. It will be something else. So everything was wrong and everything was approximate in his interpretation of Lagadha Jyotisha. It's not true. It has fairly up to second decimal accurate values of both the sidereal and the synodic period of moon, because the purpose was to calculate the Tithi and Nakshatra. And for that, this accuracy was needed. Otherwise, within 2 or 3 sort of months, you will have the Tithi and Nakshatra going away, even Amavasya not coming all right, Purnima not coming all right, which are the most observed things. Whereas the solar year, which was supposed to start with the winter solstice at the beginning of Dhanishta, of course, if it was not so, still wherever it starts, you can use this 5-year period. With this period for moon and the 2 periods for the moon, you get reasonably accurate values of Tithi and Nakshatra, provided your starting epoch values are reasonable. Again, that has this very beautiful thing called rule of 3, which is considered a fairly advanced bit of mathematics in later period, even in Europe. And again, it has this daylight formula, that the length of the day. And it's almost like a linear algebraic formula. It is stated the number of muhurtas of a day from the starting of the winter solstice. He has a formula. And that formula, of course, has one limitation, that the longest day and the shortest day turn out to be 18 muhurtas and 12 muhurtas. Muhurta is 48 minutes, 1/30th of a day. So this is true only in a latitude of 35 or around that. And that will be the northernmost part of Bharat, or the Kashmir, or somewhere there. And so this is what caught the attention of Indologists when they started looking at Babylonian astronomy in 19th century. The Babylonian material became available after 1850s, these clay tablets. Till then, one had not heard of Babylonian astronomy in modern histories, except via what the Greeks had said about Chaldeans or things like that. I may not be right, you may correct me on this point. But after 1880s, when these clay tablets became available, there were various Jesuit scholars, German and British, who started working on them, and they deciphered the language. So by 1900, I think it was Krugel or one of them, who had seen a Babylonian daylight table, which had this 3:2 ratio for the ratio of the longest day to the shortest day. And before that, George Thibault, who had summarized Indian astronomy as was known, he was also a co-author with Sudhakar Dwivedi of Panchasiddhantika edition. So George Thibault wrote an article in German, a review article in 1890s. So where he said that this Vedanga Jyotisha, this thing should have come from Babylon. He was still speculating, and when Krugel said that here is the 3:2, it became almost like QED. And so this Vedanga Jyotisha from 1900 has been thought of, the Lagadha Jyotisha has been thought of as especially this daylight formula. And this got corrected again by not any Indian sort of astronomer and mathematician. It was a student of Professor K. Shukla, a Japanese student, called Yukio Ohashi. And he was a student of Shukla, and he wrote on astronomical instruments in 1970s. First articles in 1990s. And around that period, he started calculating in different parts of India how the daylight variation formula, exact formula, would look. So if you assume that this is a formula for 35 degrees, it is not at all a formula for 35 degrees. A straight line from 12 to 18 muhurtas over this half the ayana, that fits with the actual value of the daylight in 35 degrees latitude only at the end points only. Whereas for latitudes of 27 and 29, this straight line fits with the variation of the value of daylight, except at the point of maximum, except at the what is called the summer solstice, that will not hold. Whereas for these 2 seasons following the equinox, it will be fairly accurate, in fact very accurate in the band of 27 to 29. That couldn't have been a formula which could have been used in Babylon. In fact, Pingree had said that this is there in a text called Mulapin. But Mulapin actual daylight formula has a different thing. It has, I think, a 2:1 ratio. 3:2 appears somewhere else, and it's also not a table. Because the Babylonian region is also not in 35 degrees latitude. It's around 31. The important places, Uruk, Babylon, Nineveh, etc., are in around 31, 32. And they had later a different formula. Initially, the older, I think, tables or texts had a 2:1 ratio between the longest day to shortest day. They were not really scanning it day by day by day. They were scanning it at 4 points in this, and they were having some initial values like that. The later Mesopotamian, Babylonian sort of daylight formulae, which were written perhaps more in the post 400 BC period, mostly in the perhaps Seleucid period, they use a polygonal approximation, not a single line, to fit the variation of daylight. So there is nothing Mesopotamian about the Vedanga Jyotisha daylight formula. It's fairly accurate in 27 to 29. So in that sense, it's an important text of Indian astronomy. Now, there's a question about its period and time, that it talks about the winter solstice at the beginning of Shravishta. When William Jones read it, he had no doubt that it was somewhere around 1100 BCE or 1200 BCE. That's what he said, as Professor Engar has pointed out several times. But later on, lots of doubts are cast on that, and for various reasons, I think it has been dated from 5th century BCE to maybe 4th century AD. Because the Yajurveda part of the Vedanga Jyotisha actually talks of those 1830 as civil days. So Pingree says this must be totally wrong. This is nothing to do with the Lagadas Jyotisha. Only the Rik Jyotisha is correct. It says 1830, but we can take it to be sidereal days. So like that, this is how it was thought of. Nobody wrote a full explanation of Vedanga Jyotisha, explaining all these points and whatever are the confusions, whatever are this. So people know about it, but this is how this. Now the next change starts occurring only in the 21st century. And that starts with the study of, are there other texts? So two texts that are told in the other later corpus are the text of Parashara and the text of Garga. And this study started only in the 21st century, largely. There were a couple of articles by David Pingree on Garga, but not on Parashara. And the Vedic corpus also, people started re-looking at it. People knew the various ordinary things there, motion of the sun, solstices, the idea of all the different kinds of months, and all the mathematics of fractions, large numbers, all those things are there. But the serious ideas about observational astronomy in the Vedic corpus, occasionally they have been noted, like from Tilak's time or even earlier, when they noted that the Kritikas are coming always seen in the east, or ideas like that. But from them, really, one could not get too much sort of systematic astronomy. So more observational aspects of Vedic astronomy have been studied maybe from late, I think Professor Abhenkar in Hyderabad was one of the persons who started studying them. Others are also studying them from various points of view. Professor Kag has studied them, and in Bangalore, Professor Engar has studied them. I'll just mention 2-3 most important sort of landmarks in this. One is the fact that Taittiriya Aranyaka mentions a constellation called Shishumara, in which there is a star called Abhaya Dhruva, and we sort of pay our respect to Dhruva, around which everything goes around. And the same Taittiriya Aranyaka description of the entire celestial sphere going around Dhruva, with the mention of the star Shishumara, with the name of all the 14 stars that form the constellation, with Abhaya Dhruva, comes in the Brahmanda Purana. And this combination is a very, very solid evidence of Indian cultural memory of having observed this fact that there is a constellation Shishumara and there is an Abhaya Dhruva which served as pole star. Now, today, or even 100 years ago, people would have known that the pole star is, the track of the pole star is such that in the last 300, 400 years, we have a pole star, which is Alpha Ursa Minoris, which our people used to call as some Dhruva Matsya or something like that, after 15th century, or even Bhaskaracharya refers to it as Dhruva Matsya, but not as Dhruva Tara. So in the north celestial pole, where the Earth's axis meets the sky, there has to be a star for it to be called a pole star. That is there in current period. It will be very closely that kind of a star by the end of this century. Right now also it's quite good for ordinary purposes. And the other one was about 5,000 years ago. Precisely around 2830, this Abhaya Dhruva was within about 15 minutes or 20 minutes of the north celestial pole. And for the previous 300, 400 years and next 300, 400 years, it would have served as the Dhruvatara. And the Suniti star is also next to it. And this memory has continued in India, and this was first pointed out by Professor Iyengar in 2011. And this is a very important marker of India's cultural history, because this is much more precise than the identification of solstices, because identification of solstices involves that nakshatra unit, that nakshatra sort of division of 13 degrees 20 minutes, where exactly it is located. So when we say Shravishtadi, so we have to exactly pinpoint where Shravishtadi is. So those have to be studied and established. Some work has been done in the last 20, 30 years on that, starting from Professor Abhayankar to Professor Iyengar's group. I'm sure much more work will happen on this. The second thing was the mention of 3,339 Vishvedevas who sort of do the Somapana during the Krishna Paksha. And that is given in Rigveda, and that occurs as an important corpus to be recited during the Darsha Poornaprajna Yajna. And this clearly showed that they had been observing the moon's position over a period of twice 3,339. So that is 6,678. If you take them to be tithis, then this will roughly turn out to be very close to 18 years, which we all know is the ancient Saros period of eclipses. So there are statements even in other literature about eclipses succeeding after 6 months and solar eclipse coming after 5 months. But this 18-year period and this study of all the moon's position over 18 years, first is the number 3,339, then this Vedi of Darsha Poornaprajna has a peculiar trapezial structure with the two curved sort of lines in the both sides. And if you calculate the area of this Vedi, it turns out to be, as per Shulba Sutra values, it turns out to be 3,339. And actually the path of moon's declination over an 18-year period is sort of simulated on the earth by what is happening there in the sky in the Darsha Poornaprajna Vedi. So these are sort of discoveries which we should have been talking around in great detail all around and understanding in every part of our sort of studies of ancient India. So this kind of looking at the Vedic corpus has started in 21st century, which has great potential. First of all, we are identifying observational astronomical factors, and the datings are much better, numbers are much better, and this is one kind. Now when we come to the two other texts which have come up, Parashara Tantra has been culled out from the extensive quotations given in Bhattotpala's commentary on Brihad Samhita or Apneda's Brihad Samhita. So Professor Iyengar published it in 2013. Earlier people were only talking about it. And once he published it, we found that the Lagada Jyotisha is only a part of Vedanga Jyotisha. It does not talk about planets. It does not talk about eclipses. And Parashara Tantra has a detailed sort of description of all aspects of what we today call as astral sciences, astronomy and all other aspects of related things. And so many important things about that have come out in Professor Iyengar's book. It has discussed the planetary periods, reasonable planetary periods for Jupiter and Saturn, and the synodic period for Venus. It has a discussion of Agastya Chara, the star which is seen only below 37 degrees latitude, which is very specific to Indian observational astronomy. It has this great discussion on Dhumaketus or Ketus, and detailed periods are mentioned, and many other aspects, rainfall, all things are there. I'm sure all of you have seen the book, and Professor Engar will tell us something more, I'm sure. And the thing after that is the Vriddhagargiya Jyotisha, and Vriddhagargiya Jyotisha drew some attention from Professor Pingree. He wrote an article, I think, in 80s on Venus in Garga Samhita, and he gave a translation of a portion of that Shukrachara, I think, and he did not publish the original there, and he then said that this is all very similar to what is there in Babylonian sources. He quoted some Babylonian sources, but not chapter and verse. He gave various references to them. And the general idea that we have these omens and then we do the Shanti. Similar thing is there in Babylon also. They observed these planets and they have the word Namburbi for that. And so all these kinds of more qualitative correspondences were used to give a technical text and then say this is all derived from Mesopotamia. This is somewhat very peculiar way of Professor Pingree's sort of discussion whenever he talks about transmission. Otherwise, he is a very, very meticulous scholar. So, Vriddhagargiya Jyotisha now has been sort of taken up. Professor Mack is also associated with a group of European and American scholars who are working on it. They have written a couple of papers, and he has himself written some translations of particular sections and chapters. But continuous work has been going on in the past 4 or 5 years in Jain University, and one first, I think, amongst the 60 Samudesha, I think 2 have been sort of covered, and they are in the process of covering 2 more. Of the 64, the first 24 are very important, and the 24th Samudesha, which was called Mahasalila, unfortunately, this was misunderstood by everybody because nobody had looked at the text in great detail. So the listing of the chapters, this Garga Samhita's Yuga Purana chapter was edited by Michener, I think about 30 years ago. So he is giving a contents of Garga Samhita. So there he is saying this chapter deals with rainfall and things like that. Professor Pingree also says that. So whereas this Mahasalila turned out to be a sort of a very important text written in almost Vedic Brahmana style prose in a question and answer dialogue form, and that has many, many interesting questions as well as answers of the evolution of the Indian astronomical ideas. It has the names of 108 grahas, of which 101 are Dhumaketus, and the other 7 are the sun, moon, and the 5 Tara grahas. It has something on the luminosity of the 5 grahas in terms of the number of rays, which you can see is similar to the measure of their luminosity when you see from the earth. The ratios are very similar, and it has similar calendrical yuga as the Lagadha Jyotisha or Parashara Tantra. All of them have this 67 synodic months and sidereal months and 62 synodic months in a period of 5 solar years, and that same calendar they have. Only Mahasalila talks of a Magadhi Ayana, and a Magadhi Ayana is a summer solstice in Magha, which would be ending in the Shravishta Madhya for winter solstice. So that will be about 400 years prior to the Shravishta, the winter solstice. So they have dated it between 1800 to 1600. That also occurs in the Maitrayani Upanishad. So there are now lots of texts, lots of ideas which are coming up, and a very huge text of Garga Samhita which needs to be edited and understood. So there is a lot of work. Now, but how much have we covered by way of coming from the Vedic astronomy to Siddhantic astronomy? This is an important question. We have not covered too much still, because the crucial part of the later Aryabhatan astronomy is all based upon a mathematical model of planetary motion. So what is the mathematical model of planetary motion? And what is the model for the calendar is sun and moon? What is the model for them? So there I see the one text in India which is intermediate between the qualitative descriptions and the description of synodic or sidereal periods of planets to calculating their positions in terms of some coordinates, etc. To Aryabhata, you should remember that Professor Roger Billard, 30 years ago in 1990s, he wrote a paper, he wrote a book also in French, where he tried to analyze using the parameters of Aryabhatiya and his method of calculation, where does it fit best with observation, using the whatever software that was available 30 years ago. And he found that was actually in a very small band of around 50 years, around 499. And whereas it deviates substantially in about 50-100 years later. And this was observed in India also, because within about 100 years of Aryabhatiya, there arose in Kerala a system called Parahita. And this was revised in 683. And the main purpose of this system was to correct the mean motions of Aryabhatiya. They gave corrections to the mean motions of Aryabhatiya, which was adopted by the Aryabhatan school for the next 1,000 years. So that Aryabhata's mean values would not have been so accurate, but they were fitting in 499. A minor correction is that because we are calculating from Kali Yugadi for 4,900 years, your value should be accurate to at least third or fourth decimal place. So these things are there. So Aryabhata is accurate, but how did we arrive at his model? So there were earlier models. So the only earlier model which is available in some detail is in the Vasishtha Siddhanta of Pancha Siddhantika, and qualitatively it is similar to what is worked out in Mesopotamia, what scholars have been studying in the last 100 years. There are similarities. So Yavanajataka also has this kind of same kind of. Can I take 5 more minutes?
Yes, sir. Yeah, you can.
So Yavanajataka also has this kind of thing. Yavanajataka also talks of Vasishtha. So coming to the sun, Yavanajataka says successive months you take the daily motion of sun to be 57 minutes, 58 minutes, 59 minutes, 60 up to 62 from the apogee to the perigee, and then 62 to 57. 59 minutes is the mean value of sun's daily motion. So this is a standard format of constant acceleration. So this is a problem continuously studied in India from Mahaviracharya's Ganitsar Sangraha, or even I think in Sridhara's Pati Ganita, in Narayan Pandita. So a person goes, every day he increases, daily rate of velocity is increased from something to something. And so they have the usual formula, half of, if A is the initial thing, A plus N into N minus 1 by 2, whole thing into D, something like that, D by 2. D is the step. And this formula is what is used in Vasishtha Siddhanta to calculate the position in the step value. So it not only gives a table of acceleration, it doesn't give a table of acceleration. It gives actually the formula. It's a quadratic formula in time. And in the limit, as the period over which the increase becomes smaller and smaller, using the standard Indian calculus, you can show that it goes to ut plus half at squared that we teach to everybody, which was rediscovered in Europe in 15th, 16th century. Constant acceleration. U plus at is the, I'm using a formula, I'm sure everybody would have used it. So in final velocity is U plus at, and distance traveled is ut plus half at squared. Every pre-university student is taught this. This was discovered in Europe around 15th century for freely falling bodies, and in a more graphical manner by what is called the Merton school and all that. But later on it was worked out mathematically. So roughly the same thing is there in Vasishtha for many things, this kind of a formula. It's an algebraic expression. It's an algorithm. Of course, the Babylonians also have something like this. They don't just have tables. They have tables from the earlier period, 900 to 500. So after 400 BCE, they also have more complicated tables, and they also have something called procedure text. So this procedure text also gives some algorithm. So we should not completely rule out. But that's a very late Babylonian period. It is 300 BCE, what's called the Seleucid period, 300 BCE to 50 of the Common Era. They have this kind of, so this was called famously as the linear zigzag function. Actual function is given by a sine function, and this is a linear zigzag function which approximates the sine function. And again in India we have a very curious result which is similar to this. There is a formula due to the Bhaskara I, who is the disciple of Aryabhatta, and he is in the Aryabhatta school. He is writing around 629. He is a contemporary of Brahmagupta. He has given a very interesting formula for the sine function. There sine theta is written as a ratio of two quadratic functions of theta, and theta is in radians in India. I mean, it's the arc measure in India. And this is a more important sort of approximation than what is called the first order approximation, which is a linear approximation of sine theta. It's not linear, it's a quadratic approximation multiplying two linear functions of sine theta. This is ratio of two quadratic functions. And this is accurate up to 1% over the entire 360 or 180 degrees range. And this comes within about 50 years of our discovering sine function. So they must have worked at it at that level. So this movement from having constant increases in velocity as a first approximation to variable motion. After all, what were we approximating? We were approximating the variable motion of sun and the moon to start with, and later on of the planets. And for that, their velocity is not constant. And so you put an acceleration, and you put an acceleration in a stepwise manner. And that is what is the model given in Vasishta. And for the planets, again, similar model with the observed phenomena of rising in the east, then conjunction or opposition, then setting in the east for the interior planets, rising in the west, setting in the west. So arcs between them, tithis between them, all this is worked out. Now the Babylonians are using 30th of a day as the unit for doing all this, and they don't have a name for it. Indians are using 30th of this lunar month, and that we have a name Tithi. So all scholars after Neugebauer started calling the Babylonian day as Tithi, and that said that India had borrowed from Babylon the idea of Tithi also. Babylonians have about 12-16 nakshatras discussed from 15th century prior to Common Era. But they don't have what is called the ecliptic, the path of the sun as seen from the earth among stars, being split into 27 nakshatra divisions or nakshatras as associated with ecliptic. That was not there. Even Enuma, Anu, Enlil, the oldest book is on nakshatras in 3 different pathways, and later on also. So all these have been qualitatively used to say we borrowed. But unless we study our model and unless we study their model, we don't know what was borrowed, what was the interaction. Babylon was, after all, Mesopotamia was quite close to Indian border. In 1400 BCE, in Bogas Koi, there is an inscription which talks of Mitra and Varuna and things like that, that there is a Indian culture spread there also, maybe trade or maybe whatever. So all this is there. So this Vasishta Siddhanta, we should see what is its model, and how it is given in Yavanajataka. That portion is perhaps very difficult. We are still hoping Mac will analyze the planetary model of...
It's in the missing folio.
Now you have.
Now we have.
Good. So, and Vasishta Siddhanta also we should analyze. 3 translations have appeared. Sudhakar Dwivedi and Thibault, then Pingree and Neugebauer, and Kuparna Shastri and K.V. Sharma. Kuparna Shastri has written half a dozen papers on this, but they are difficult to read. So we have to digest all of them and see what is Vasishtha Siddhanta model. And we should know the Mesopotamian model in greater detail. Now there is considerable amount of literature. So this looks like an intermediate. But the Indian way that Vasishtha Siddhanta has approached the problem, it has a path to Aryabhatiya. The way Babylonians have approached, and later on the Greeks who appropriated the Babylonian and went into model, there is no pathway to the Aryabhatian way of looking at planetary models, all in terms of formulae and relations and equations. Theirs is all geometry and tables, and that continues for a very long time. So there should be a lot of transmission, but Pingree's way of formulating it, that we wholesale borrowed theories, was something that I think Bill Mack would say it was done in the enthusiasm of his youth. That as soon as he saw this Yavanajataka when he was 20, he decided that he had found that text which shows the way the Greek astronomy or Greco-Babylonian astronomy is transmitted to India. Just a last small story. Professor Pingree could not get the manuscript of Yavanajataka from Nepal. They said, we cannot give it to you. So then the Indian ambassador here was John Kenneth Galbraith, whom all of you would have heard, one of the famous Harvard professors. And he intervened with both the governments of India and Nepal. And that's how it got. I very much doubt whether any Indian scholar would get any manuscript from either India or outside with the intervention either of our ambassadors or of our leaders. Thank you very much. I have taken too much time. So
It's always a pleasurable experience listening to you, sir, and particularly the journey that he taken us for through space and time, both in the Desha and Kala, is something very remarkable, and we always experience the same thing whenever we listen to him. And a couple of very important things. That one, how should we revisit or reinvestigate the already investigated things? That is the first thing. And second thing, how should we bring it into the mainstream education also? He particularly mentioned that the observations or the findings of R.N. Iyengar in terms of Somapana legend and all, we need to bring it into the mainstream education. And I recollect another statement also from Professor Srinivasji, that in another conference, the famous statement from Nilakanta Somayaji, Tayor Brahmana Vrittena na bhuhu kavali kriyate, tato bahireva bhuhu. Particularly, he brings a substantial reformation in the planetary model from the geocentric to not fully heliocentric, which is geoheliocentric, but that is a very important observation by Nilakanta Somayaji. He says that Buddha and Shukra, they are, So those things also he mentioned that it needs to be brought into the mainstream education. So these are something that, some of the things that we must bring into the policy level also. So with this, once again, I thank, and we will continue the interaction. Now that already Professor Srinivasji mentioned what kind of advancement has been brought in, particularly in the pre-Aryabhata period, whatever our understanding was there in the 20th century, and what kind of advancement has been made, particularly with the research of Professor Iyengarji. That is something very remarkable concerned in this area. I also recollect my student days when, or even while studying Brihat Samhita or while teaching Brihat Samhita, that in Kujachara we discuss Panchamukha, the Ushnamukha, Ashramukha, Vyala, Rudiranana. And we simply reading, and we were just, okay, so this is said like this. And really, what is the meaning? I was always curious, why these names have been given, Nistrim Shamusala or Asimushala. When I went through and my friend also, Vinay Iyer, we also often discussing some of all these astronomical aspects. And when I went through the research of Professor Iyengarji, I got some kind of, convincing answer for such things. And I remember that Professor Subbarayap also in his preface of Parashara Tantra, he mentions that the synodic period that has been mentioned in the Shukrachara that is something very remarkable observation or interpretation by Professor Iyengarji. So such scholarship we have with us. So I would like to listening from Professor Iyengarji that what kind of advancement you can share some of your experiences also while how you engaged in this particular exploration, and how can we take it forward, and what kind of engagement is required. Over to you, sir.
Good evening to all of you. It's already getting late. It's 6 o'clock. I don't think I should be giving a long lecture on that. Whatever has to be said about pre-Siddhantic astronomy has been said by Professor Srinivas. Broadly, there is nothing extra special to add. But this being not a lecture program, because he told me it is a panel discussion. A discussion would mean there can be difference of opinions and those things have to come out. So even though I agree with all of what Professor M.D. Srinivasa said, I have to say a few things which also would maybe disagree with what Dr. Pejataya has said, The thing is, we are looking at astronomy as, in a modern sense, as a university subject or something like that. Is that the Indian way of looking? Is that the Bharatiya Parampara? Because whatever gets developed, whatever is sown, it grows in a particular way. Now, today when astronomy is discussed, I am talking in English. Maybe if you would do it in Kannada or Sanskrit or Hindi, you may say a few different things. You see the literature which is there, which is easily available. Everyone would write Indian astronomy has 3 parts. They will say Hora, there is going to be, Ganita, and then this Samhita. This is what is called Jyotisha by the Jyotishkas themselves. Then what is meant by pre-Siddhantic then? It is only we are discussing before Aryabhata, what was that mathematical astronomy? That's all what you have to say. But that would be very wrong actually. Because Jyotisha, of course, he mentioned about it has to be the observational astronomy. It is the experiential astronomy. It is not looking at the horoscopes. Let us be very clear on that. And unfortunately today, if you say anywhere, Jyotishi, Jyotisha, it is only about horoscope reading. That is what has happened. Why did it happen? Now, if you have to go back and do all of this work, attitude has to change. That means we have to go behind Rashi and we have to go behind Vara. That is the weekdays. That means we have to go behind the Panchangas. This is the important thing. Unless we critically look into our own almanacs Panchangas, let it be Sringeri Panchanga, let it be Udupi Panchanga, let it be Kanchi Kwamakoti Panchanga or Banaras Panchanga, I don't care. This has to be looked into. Why there is so much of difference? That's all mathematics. What we will say, look, I have done so much of calculation, I am getting this sputa, that sputa, and it is going to give you 65 pages of numbers. What does that mean finally? Is it knowledge? Somebody may get satisfied. All that you generate on the computer today, like this was the older AI, that I appreciate. There is 1500 years old AI was that. But not today, it is something different. Now, when we talk of the ancient astronomical, I would say the tradition before Aryabhata. Aryabhata is just a name. Now you see Aryabhata, for all the other interesting things which Professor M.D. Srinivas said, he said it is the earth which rotates. The day and night happens because of the rotation of the earth. All other astronomers pooh-poohed him, they didn't accept that. Still, it went and we have come to the 21st century, so to say. Now, how did he get that idea? And if you see in the Puranas, in the Brahmanda Purana, while discussing the Shishumara, he says, the Sutta says, all if you look there, it is Dhruva who is rotating. And that shloka says, every day for 30 muhurtas, he is rotating. Now, you imagine this. If we have to give an example of relative motion, this is what is presently said. We feel that we are fixed, but that is rotating. The Bhapanjara is rotating. That is the idea he got. Now, these are the ideas which are important than the numbers, the results and other things. Now, this idea, if we have to capture, we have to go back. That is the intellectual tradition we have to see. It is not simply the astronomy of planets, because there are no planets in the Vedas, so Indians did not know. Okay, let anybody say whatever they want. We have to go back and see this. This is going to be the Parisiddhantic astronomical effort that we have to put, is my feeling. Reason being, I will tell you a Rigvedic mantra. Ekaya prathida trimshat saramse apibat indro somasya kanuka. That is in the 8th mandala. The literal meaning, which is in the Gayatri Chandas, is Indra, in one go, he drank 30 cups of Soma, because Indra is the lover of Soma. So this is the Soma, and Soma, everybody would say, you look into the koshas and this and that, it's the Soma Yaga which people are doing even today. It is being done in Kerala. Fritz Stahl came to record it. Our people did not take interest. The foreigners, all this blah, 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 and they recorded it. They were very special for them. So many things. Is that what is meant by there? How can he drink 30 cups of Soma? And who is Indra? And if you see the literature, our own literature, the Nirukta, and then Sayana Bhashya. This is what we generally do, because that is what is available. The other things are missing maybe. And that is the culture, that is the, we can say, the parampara, because there is so much of Bharati Jnana parampara which is being taught. Half of that jnana is ajnana only, because that has to be replaced by vijnana. Because that vijnana is missing, because the thinking is missing, it is being only whitewashed. What Nirukta says? Nirukta says, Yajnika Mata, 30 cups of Soma has to be offered to Indra in the Madhyandina Samana. Okay. And he also says, Eka Devata Api, 30 cups should be given. Because Indra is Eka Devata, only one Devata. As per Mimamsakas, depending on the number of Devatas, that many number of cups has to be given. You have to give for Vasu 8 cups. You have to give for Aditya 12 cups. You have to give for Maganakshetra 6 cups you have to give. Because there are 6 stars in the Maganakshetra. These are the kind of knowledge which comes from the past. That is on which our culture, you can say astronomy is also based. Now what does further he says in Nirukta? 30 is all right, but Nairukta Prasiddhya, it is not the thing. Indra drinks 30 cups of Soma, means Saramsi means moonlight in the Krishna Paksha. In the Apara Paksha, he continuously drinks for 30. 15 ahaha, 15 ratri. That is the meaning of that. And Sayanacharya writes in his Bhashya for this, Nairukta Prasidhyatu Kalabhimani Indraha. So Indra should be treated as a Kalabhimani. Indra should not be treated as a drunkard. That is the important thing. There may be so many other stories which develop, but if you take it only in that sense, okay, you get your popular culture, and unfortunately, that has become the Adhidaivata Paksha. Whereas both Sayana and Yaska would say Adhidaivata Paksha are all celestial bodies. And it is the celestial bodies, who are they? I may not know. That is a different matter. But their position is in the sky. The devatas are in the sky. Now, through, you may say, I do some yoga, sir, I can see it in my. Okay, that is a different thing. Because there is a Adhyatma Paksha also. The Adhyatma Paksha, okay, Chandra is Manas. But clearly says in the Adidevata Paksha, Somo Chandrama. Even in the Vivaha Sukta, he once again says that. Now, why did we forget this? This is the question we should ask. The Vaidikas, including, should ask this. And is it totally lost? No. Professor Srinivas mentioned about the Purnamasa. Of course, these are the things which have been bothering me. Get mad sometimes with this. I explained to Professor Mark also today when he came to my room about the Purnamasa and the 371 Tithi and how is the integral number which is there of the 3339. Trinishata, Trisahasrani, Trimshachya Deva, Navacha Saparyan. It goes like that. Now, you can say, no, every mantra in Rigveda has to be only about Brahman. Everything should only be about, or in an esoteric thing, about Sri Aurobindo has translated, it has to be only mystical. That is not right. Why? Because our parampara itself says it is a kind of idamitham, you can't say, even though you may use the word Siddhanta. And you just think, why there are so many Siddhantas? Why there are so many differences of opinions? That is nature. So even previously, if you take the original thing as Rigveda and from there a parampara has grown, we have come through the filters of Yaska and of the Shulba Sutras, of the Kalpa, of the, I said already, Nirukta and Jyotisha also. When Jyotisha, when it comes, put our hands up. What is Vedanga Jyotisha? Can Yavanajataka be considered Vedanga Jyotisha? Yavanajataka is important. That is different matter. Vedanga Jyotisha has to be something which explains the Vedas. It is to some extent in the Puranas we get that. In Vishnu Purana, Brahmanda Purana we get that. But the Puranas are in a different situation. So we have to discriminate between two things. This is where this special, what I call Vijnana comes in. That means the text today I am having, it's a physical object. There will be so many things in it. But inside there will be a few which may belong to a very ancient period. This, of course, as an earth scientist or anybody who works in geology or these kind of things would know, archaeologists would know. Everything is muck in the earth. But you keep on digging layer by layer, you get something, you know. You want to get gold, you have to, tons of things you have to remove. It's called paleontology. As you go down, you get different layers. Our 5,000 years of historical literature or intellectual literature is layered. And you have to pick up the right thing if you are interested in that. There is no point in criticizing, oh, Puranas are all junk. They gave kalpa of 14 million things, this, that, and all that. For a different reason they would have given. Because they gave a definition of time. Now, all the Siddhantic astronomers, kindly excuse me, they would call themselves Kala Nirnayakas. Because it's the Kala Nirnaya Shastra or the Kala Vidhana Shastra it is called. Not going to be Grahashastra or Grahachara, even though they may decide my Grahachara by that. It is only the Kala Nirnayaka Shastra. What is the definition of Kala? You may give Vedantic definitions, but we are working in phenomenal thing. And Maitrayani Aranyaka, to which he referred, Professor Srinivas, about the Magadhi, he defines the Kala. Suryo Yonihi Kalasya. It is from the birth of sun you have to do, and it is the Ahargana that is going to be the integral numbers. And that is how the 3339 or something else has come. Now, if you think that the nakshatras are only for moon, that is our fault. Maybe in the last 150 years, because of various exposure, Thibaut and even to some extent Dikshit, and those people, they gave a kind of explanation. It seemed as though it is all going to be only the what you would call the lunar zodiac, or even in the papers they would say the Rashi Jyotisha. As per the sun sign, your future is different. As per the moon sign, your future is different. That's the kind of system which has come in. That is wrong. Veda doesn't say that. Clearly, it is the early morning nakshatra with which sun was rising. That means before sunrise, what was the nakshatra which was there? And K.V. Sharma has very well written on this. And that Anuvaka which is there in the Taittiriya Brahmana, tat punyam nakshatram, that but kurvita, it comes like that, That punyam nakshatram and how to mark it, and with actually a string, you might make a chinha, lower you make another chinha, and within that is the punyaha. In that punyaha, you do all your work. Is the Vedic injunction, is not what I am telling. Why did we forget all this? So, coming now to cut my thing short, we had to go back. If you are interested in this, and start with the Vedic things, not simply the Bhashyas. There are Bhashya departments, I know, in the Sanskrit universities and all that. You can't do that. And you can't simply read Griffith's translation and come to your conclusion. You can't simply read Sayana Bhashya and say, okay, this is all what is there. And you can't keep on cribbing, okay, Venkatamadhava is not fully available, Bhattavaskara, it is, for this is missing, this has not been edited like that. We have to make our effort to understand that. Why there is no commentary for Maitrayani Samhita? Now, Maitrayani Samhita is the one which holds. And if the Mitani, he was mentioning about that of 1400 BC, Mitani could be an Apabhramsha of Maitrayani. I'm not pointing it out. People have already mentioned these things, It could have been a Apabhramsha of that, because after the emigration out of India, assuming that it is correct, or it is one postulation, people went out and they are the Mitanis. Yes, because the Maitrayani Samhita is not practiced today, except there are a few families in the Nasik region who are no more now. Maybe I may be wrong. But it is the Taittiriya which we follow. There is difference between Taittiriya and Maitrayaniya. And Kapishthala and Kata, they are only printed. Nobody follows them. That's also gone. Now, why we so much taking the comments of that there are no planets in Veda, Indians did not know planets, only after the Greek thing it came, and our own people have written articles on what are the Greek numbers which are there in Aryabhata's planetary theory. How did he might have got those numbers and all those things. And what about the Graheshti Brahmana of the Kata Shaka, which is still remaining, which has been printed also? What was the original for the Graheshti Brahmana? And you talk of the Nakshatraheshti. Okay, Nakshatraheshti is, what is the connection between the later Nakshatras, the sidereal month and the synodic month? Because the Nakshatraheshti talks of Purnima and Amavasya also. It doesn't say only about the Nakshatras. Why we have not studied all these things? Reason I can tell you, it is because of a kind of a narrow-mindedness that all that has to be understood of the Vedas has been done, and Vedas are very sacred. They have to be pure. You should not touch them. You should not discuss them. We should not understand them. Now, when I came here, Professor Pandarangi was talking about Indology, of the perspective, of a Western perspective and an internal perspective. Yes, I agree. We don't have our own internal perspective of our own culture. Why comment on others and why say something else about others? We have to develop that, And this is pre-Siddhantic astronomy. Unless we go back and also understand the rituals, because these three are continuous. The Adhiyajna, the Adhidaivata, and the Adhyatma. All the three Parampara has brought in up to this day. They are not strands. They are twisted rope. Because they are twisted, it is staying to this day. It is alive to this day. Otherwise, why in our day-to-day rituals among the Hindus, I would say, all the symbols are only astronomical. They may all be wrong, that is different. You may celebrate the Uttarayana Punyakala on the wrong day, that is a different matter. Whether the Tarpana given it goes to the Pitras or not, it is a different matter. But they are all connected only with these things. The Chat Puja connected with the Shashti. What is Shashti? On the Shashti, I would say Kartikeya fell down, that is in the Mahabharata. I am not telling that. These are astral. And we should not forget that. That strand, if you see where is this Adidevata thing, we can go back to Prasiddhantic astronomy. Now, Mahasalila, Virdagarga, Parashara are incidental. These are things, which I was searching, I got something and I wanted to publish it because of my curiosity and I didn't have any other better business to do. But the mistake is elsewhere. The weakness is elsewhere. If that weakness is adjusted, it is not simply only with astronomy. Mathematics automatically comes in. Why should, in the Rig Veda, he should say, Indra drinks 30 cups of Soma. Why that 30? Why this 3339? Why 27? These are all numbers. It is not only there. Taittiriya Samhita, the 7th Kanda, there are yagas only for the numbers, not the Ekachame, Trisashame. There are other numbers are also which are there. What do they mean? Were they so stupid as to bring in numbers? Numbers are known to be, quantification is the foundation of science. And that science is what is missing. That science we have to understand, that is the Vijnana which is needed. And when in the Rig Veda itself it says Maruts are 7 or 7 into 7 or they are going to be 82 or 86. They counted something. It is not the Vayu which you can count, it should be something else. So how did this count come? What is meant by Ardhadeva? Is it the half god? Ardhadeva is a very common thing there. And who is that Ardhadeva? And okay, Sayana gives some explanation. You are satisfied with it, it is okay, it's your choice. But if you are interested in this, in the Adidevata Paksha, we have to get into that very incisively. Well, with these things, a little bit, maybe I exceeded my time and, okay, it doesn't matter. All right, I pass on the mic to you. You want to say something?
No, I just wanted to pass it on to Professor Bill Max. So, particularly, you are editing the volume on foreign astral science in China. So, anything from that you would like to offer that would be helpful to this discussion? Maybe. Yeah. So, whatever relevant to this particular topic. So.
Yeah, I think you have heard a lot from me already, so it's really a privilege to hear from two experts on this topic. I want to highlight that actually what Professor Srinivas mentioned, he highlight all these points, important points for research. Almost every point that he mentioned could be made into a PhD thesis that can be submitted to any university in the world. So that is the importance, but also at the same time, it tells you our deficiency. The reason why these topics are not pursued is because they are very difficult. We need more training in the language, and also as Professor Iyengar mentioned, that we really have to dig deep into the sources, and that requires us to have a very proficient understanding of Sanskrit language, but also to understand how to work with manuscripts. We are all a little bit lazy if there's an addition, and we may use it, or even the lazier people use translation, and even lazier people use whatever they can find in the internet. And we know, as the work we have shown, they are not good enough. But the sources are available there. If you look hard enough, if you spend enough time, there's immense amount of knowledge to be discovered. in terms of some of the works that I did related to what were mentioned, I think nakshatras in particular should be highlighted. And this is the interesting thing also from a comparative point of view. The Chinese also have something similar to nakshatras. And there have been a long time speculation of who is the first. And to me, that's not important. No, that's not the most important thing. What I'm interested in how these ideas evolved and how they interact with each other, or if at all. Because after all the peoples on this planet are looking at the same sky. They could just be doing their own independent observation and happen to have similar observations and conclusion. But what we have seen in the sources did tell a story of exchange and transmission. And in some cases, it actually helped us to understand both traditions, how they came about. In the case of the Buddhist materials, I think they are quite interesting because the Chinese Buddhists have very meticulously dated all their translations. So these translations are like time capsules. Okay, this one is from 2nd century, and then 3rd century, 4th century, and 5th century. And what we find in nakshatras, there's a body of literature that describe the nakshatras not being an equally divided system. It's an unequal system, like 3 kind of nakshatras, like the small, and then the medium, and the large nakshatras. And those data actually, they add up together, very interesting, because they tells you the story of the difference between the 28 and 27 nakshatras. So the 28th nakshatra, that is being an additional one on top of the 27, is Abhijit. And I wrote a paper recently and discussing the background for Abhijit. The god, the deva that is associated with Abhijit is Brahma. So there was something very strange about this nakshatra, because if it is assigned a width, it is very narrow. The time period is sometimes like 6 muhurta. Very unusual. And then it's very small. And then it's associated with Brahma, which is not a prominent deva in the Rig Veda. So all this tell us maybe there's a development in this nakshatra system and an attempt to reach a more accurate value for the synodic month. So all these things, sometimes when we do comparative study, it gives a layer of understanding, and then we see how things evolve in a more accurate way. I'm a Buddhist, and there's a Buddhist philosophy that I like a lot. In Pali is Yatha Bhuta Dhyana Darshanam. So in Sanskrit is Yatha Bhuta Dhyana Darshanam. So the knowledge and the understanding of things as they are. And this is very challenging because at every moment, in every time period, we have some bias, we have some understanding that sort of give a color lens of what we see. So how can we see things as they truly are? It's an ongoing journey. And as historians, what we see is, okay, all the materials, Yavanajataka, Vashishta, Siddhanta, and Pancha Siddhantaka, and all the text, they are all bits and pieces in the big scheme of things. They are just moments. So as historians, we try to construct a narrative that explains how they are connected. Whenever a new piece of evidence comes up, then it could be challenging. So do we dismantle our old theory and then come up with a better narrative, or we build on top? So in the case of Pingree, it's actually a story of this narrative that is very, very difficult to dismantle because he constructs this heliocentric way of understanding the development of Indian astronomy. But now we have a more nuanced way of understanding how civilizations have dialogue and cultures evolved, both from through external, internal factors and also external influences. So it's a very exciting time. We are seeing things actually in not just black and white. It's actually very colorful, full of different factors and things that we can explore. So I think the pre-Siddhanta astronomy is precisely an area that previously we have overlooked. Now all the materials are there, and it's up to us to explore, and it's going to be a colorful and very exciting world. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, sir. So, some closing remarks from.
Read something from Mac. Small. No. No, this is fine. I'm very happy that I came for this discussion because by listening to both these people, I have learned more than what I had thought about this matter. And in fact, Professor Mack's work, since it confronted this narrative that Professor Pingree had very meticulously constructed and then sort of spoke about it almost in hundreds of publications, so it became the fully established narrative. It's very difficult to break that kind of a thing, and how he persisted with it, I don't know with what difficulty. But we are all admiration for what you took it up. Since you have been repeatedly saying that Professor Pingree didn't acknowledge, I just wanted to tell you that in his almost last article, this is an article that Professor David Pingree wrote. It was published 2 years after his passing away in 2007. The article is called Mesopotamian and Greek Astronomy in India. It appeared in a volume which felicitates a German Professor Wilhelm Habermas, who is a great student of study of Europe and India. So the volume is called Expanding and Merging Horizons, Contributions to South Asian and Cross-Cultural Studies, edited by Karin Presendans, Professor Vienna, and Karin Steiner, Vienna Austrian Academy of Science. I'll send you the reference. No. Here, it's about 10-page article where Professor Pingree is summarizing how Greek astronomy came to India and all that. But while talking about Spuji Dvaja, he has just quietly changed his position. Spuji Dvaja's calendar, which he attributes to the best of the Greeks, quotation, is based on an intercalation cycle of 165 solar years. It appears not to be Greek in origin, but rather 33 5-year yugas in each where 2 5 by 33 intercalary months come. In this yuga, there are 60,272 days, 61,230 tithis, 60,437 sidereal days, 1,980 solar months, 2,041 lunar months, 2,206 sidereal months, 61 intercalary months. Reference Yavanajataka 79 verses 6 to 10 and 20. This calendar may be used by Rudradaman, one for the first time in India, 150. All the rest is a time. No. What Professor Pingree here is done, the issue at sort of dispute was this number of civil days in 165-year yuga, and Professor Pingree sort of amended the text to get that as 60,265 days, such that finally, may not be intentionally, but it so turned out that the length of the year turns out to be Hipparchian year. Though this is text would be talking of the sidereal year, it is coming as the tropical Hipparchian year. So the correct value, as Professor Shukla pointed out, was 6,272 days, which the manuscript that Professor Mack discovered proved also. Pingree discovered it by looking at the variant readings that Shukla discovered it by looking at just the variant readings that Pingree presented in his own book. So he did the undermining of whatever he had done by his own book only, because he was kind enough to produce all the variant readings in the margin. So this 60,272 days and civil days, which gives the year value, in fact, which is perhaps slightly better than the Surya Siddhanta also. It is 365.284 or something, whereas Surya Siddhanta I think is 365.288 or something. And so this. So this he has accepted, only he didn't cite the article of Professor Shukla, but this he has done. So in his last article. So whatever the work these people have done has been acknowledged in some sense. And
Yeah, so that actually brings a very good conclusion to this discussion. Particularly, the things that have been emphasized on are reconsulting or revisiting the manuscripts, or close reading of though these the books are already published or translated, but going back to the primary sources, consulting them or revisiting them with different perspectives. These things have been emphasized upon, and with this spirit, let us conclude this particular discussion. And I request Acharya Virnara Pandurangiji to give the closing remarks and felicitate the
Yes.
distinguished scholars.
As a befitting beginning of our lecture series, as highlighted by Professor R.N. Iyengar, it is very important to understand our own tradition. That is the research. All we emphasize to all our younger colleagues and all our students, whatever is there, much is written, but we should understand in a true perspective how our ancestors saw the things. In the same way, we should understand, and that will throw new light on the even Vedic studies and all other things. We will have much more better understanding of the text. That's why it is very important to revisit our texts, writing new commentaries, and Adhidayavata Paksha is very important thing. The very important methodology of understanding Vedic things, as highlighted by Professor Iyengar. So I thank all of you, Professor M.D. Srinivas sir, truly deserving Padma Shri from the Government of India. And it is the first time that Professor M.D. Srinivas is here in Poornaprajna Samshodhana. I welcome and I request him to visit Poornaprajna Samshodhana Mandiram again and again, and bless us with your presence and guidance. And Professor R.N. Iyengar, he has been here earlier also, and he is with always us and guiding us. I thank Professor R.N. Iyengar and also Professor Bill Mack. I had seen you in World Conference 2012 in Delhi.
Wow,
I thought you still.
that's 30 years ago, more than 40 years ago.
Yes. And again, I thank you for making time to come here and speak about the Yavanajataka. I always, there is welcome here. Anytime you can come here and work with us. And I congratulate and Professor Ramakrishna Pejattaya, who has coordinated and brought all the people here, because Dr. Mack is here for a week and they wanted to have a session in the city also. So we have brought all the people here, and we are very much fortunate to have all of you. I thank you and all your colleagues in Chanakya University and all the colleagues in Jain University led by Professor Shankar sir. And I thank all of you for coming here and making this lecture series very successful. And I request all of you to give more lectures on the series, in this series, on the different aspects of Indian philosophies. I will welcome you. Always we stand with you. Thanks to all of you. This Bhagavad Gita. Summary of Bhagavad Gita written by Sri Vishweshwar Swamiji, our founder. Thank you.
ನಾವು ಬುಕ್ ರಿಲೀಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
ನಮ್ಮಂಥವರೆಲ್ಲ ಓದಿದ್ರೆ ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಪ್ರಚಾರ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
ಇದು ನನಗೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಒಂದು ಕಾಪಿ.
ಮತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ರಿಗೆ not to forget, we will have a photograph also. All of us. Sir. Sir, ಒಂದು ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ ಒಂದು ಬನ್ನಿ.